Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network, WCW Halloween Havoc 1990. And if you haven't seen my shows before, we grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Let's jump right into it. First thing, I'm going to mention this at the end. I feel like this is a condensed version of the show. There was only 6 matches and it was under 2 hours. And when you look at Wikipedia, it lists about 5 other matches. I'm kind of wondering if this is a rip-off of a VHS release, because I know sometimes when WCW released the VHSs, they would cut out some of the content and just give us the best matches or the most important matches. But anyway, I digress. Let me jump right into this. First match, we have Tommy Wildfire Rich and Ricky Morton going up against the Midnight Express. This is Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton. They have Jim Cornette with him, obviously, as they would. I thought this was a really good opener. I really enjoyed this. It kind of was cool seeing 3/4 of one of the most legendary feuds of all time. One of the Rock and Rolls and the Midnights there. It was an awesome match. I really enjoyed these guys working together. Tommy Wildfire Rich, another really great wrestler. Kind of a bit on the underrated side, if you ask me. A lot of people point to him and say he's one of the worst NWA champions of all time. I don't think that. He was a transitional champion. Yeah, he only had the belt for a little bit. But I could think of so much worse wrestlers than him. I actually thought he was really good. Maybe some of his best stuff wasn't at that time frame, but I thought he was really good in Georgia Championship Wrestling and in Memphis and CWA and other places. Even when we got into the mid-90s when he was in ECW as the Big Don, I thought he was really good and entertaining. The end of the match sees the Southern Boys, which coincidentally has another member of the FBI, Tracy Smothers. They come out dressed like Jim Cornette to cause some distractions to basically nullify Jim Cornette. Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton pick up the win on it. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was a really good opener. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun match. Now from that we go to an interview with Sting, which while Sting's talking, the Black Scorpion appears on stage, and this is one of the ones where he does one of his magic tricks. He makes one of the fans disappear, and then he disappears, and Sting's left to chase him and look like an idiot, basically. Watching it at the time, I was 13 when this happened, so I'm aging myself here. I didn't think the Black Scorpion thing was as bad as it is in hindsight. I actually kind of liked it. I was hoping and looking for the reveal. I was already at that point someone that was reading all the wrestling magazines, like Wrestling Observer, The Wrestler, Wrestling Eye, I think, was one of them. There wasn't internet yet, or there was, but it wasn't all the way what it would be later on. I had already known about Sting in different places. I had already read up about Sting in different places and seen videos and stuff of him So there was always this question of who the Scorpion was going to be. So to me, it was a much more intriguing thing. When he would bring up stuff, it was for the fans like myself that had read up about Sting and read up about Sting's history. Being that Sting at the time was one of my favorite wrestlers, he was obviously someone I would read every article that was printed. I was under the impression it would be someone like the Angel of Death, which I believe at some point he was under the mask, or someone of that nature, someone from World Class of his early, or not World Class, USWA. I was thinking of the Warrior there for a moment. From USWA, or even from Mid-South, with Sting, coming back and being that. But anyway, watching it back now, it's very hokey. It feels a lot like the Magician Secrets Reveal TV shows, especially with the getup he wears, where it's kind of not real good magic tricks. And again, at the time, thought it was awesome. Looking back, not so much. Next up, chronologically, and this is all based on what's on the video. I know that these matches aren't what the order was on the actual card. Like I said, I looked it up on Wikipedia because I felt like it was a little bit short. We get the Freebirds. This version is Michael Hayes and Jimmy Jam Garvin with Richard Marley, aka Rocky King. He's dressed up as Robert Gibson, and the reason for that is the Freebirds injured Robert Gibson. That's why he wasn't part of the first match. The Freebirds are going up against the Renegade Warriors, Chris and Mark Youngblood. I mentioned this recently on another video I had where they came up and it was around this era. I really enjoyed the Renegade Warriors. I kind of liked their gimmick. I enjoyed them as a team. I thought they had a good presence. They had a good vibe to them. They were a very good babyface team. Yeah, the gimmick might not fly nowadays. I don't think there was anything inherently, how should I say, racist or off-putting about the gimmick. I'm not sure. I don't believe they're actual Native Americans, so that may be problematic nowadays. But I don't feel like they were played much in a stereotypical way. Yeah, they had some elements of that, but I think that was more of an homage instead of, like stereotyping them, if that makes sense. Kind of like, and coincidentally, this is just a shirt I put on today. It didn't have anything to do with this, but like Tatanka. I never felt, even though Tatanka had a lot of stereotypes in there, I never felt like it was on a bad day, if that makes sense. It didn't feel like Tatanka, or in this case the Renegade Warriors, came from a bad place. It felt like they came from a place of honor and respect, in my opinion. Back to the match. The match was alright. I kind of enjoyed it. Freebirds do pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 3. Next up, we get an interview with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious, talking about their matches that are coming up later in the show. How can you not love this? Arn does the lion's share of the talking. Ric Flair does his part. Two of the great talkers of all time. Then they finish it off with Sid. And I understand why. Sid was the guy that was going to be in the main event, but when you got Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, maybe bookend it with Rick and Arn doing the interview, have Rick start and Arn end, or Arn start and Rick end, and let Sid sit in the middle. Don't let Sid come in after you have two legends, two of the best talkers of all time, talking, and then you got this guy that everybody knows he's historically bad at promos. I'm laughing now because I can see it and hear it in my head. So it was good. I enjoyed it, and I actually enjoyed Sid's run as part of the Horsemen. I thought it was a fun time in wrestling. I really enjoyed this era of WCW. A lot of it maybe because of the age I was right at the what they would say the target demographic for what they were doing. And even watching it back now, I still really enjoy a lot of this. Going from that interview, we get our U.S. Tag Team Championship match. The Steiner brothers are defending against the Nasty Boys. This was a really good match. I really enjoyed it. It was more of a brawl with a lot of what the Steiners did mixed in, where there was a lot of throws and suplexes mixed in with the brawling style. The Nasty Boys kind of aren't given a lot of credit for how good of a tag team they actually were. They were really good, especially back in this era. I mean, there was a reason why they pretty much won every championship in every company they went to. They were good in the ring. They were good on the microphone. Yeah, they didn't have what you would consider a classic mat-based style, but they had great brawling style to them. The match ends up with the Steiners picking up the win here. I'm giving this one a 4. After that, we get what's an obvious cut on the video, because it goes to Scott Steiner being interviewed on the stage and talking about Rick getting injured because the Nasty Boys attacked Rick after the match. As he's talking, we see a guy coming up behind him, like that looks like he's selling peanuts or beer or whatever it is, a concession guy, and he hits Steiner with the tray, and we realize that it's Jerry Sags. And then him and Brian Knobbs attack Scott Steiner as a continuation of the match. But I have to imagine in real time, and being that this was 30 years ago, I don't really remember how it played out real time. I do remember the match. I have to imagine in real time this was after a match or two between these. But again, I think this was edited for the VHS release, and that's the version they used for this. I don't know why. I don't know why they wouldn't use the original pay-per-view release, but maybe WCW didn't save it. Who knows? Going from that, we get a match with Doom, Butch Reed and Ron Simmons defending the WCW Tag Team Championship against Arn Anderson and Ric Flair. Again, this was really good, and another thing that we could see here, this is on a match that has on a card that has 6 matches, 4 of them are tag team matches, so it shows how stacked the WCW tag team division was in this era. And I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling, so that was another reason why I really enjoyed what was going on here. This was somewhat of a dream match, 2 heel teams going up against each other. Ultimately, we see it ends up being a double countout. Both teams get counted out. I wish there was a definitive ending. I understand why they did it, to keep both of them strong. I'm going to give this one a 4, though. I thought it was really good, and it's not often you're going to see Doom and the Horsemen tangle with each other, so just for that factor, it gets a high rating. Now going from that, for the U.S. Heavyweight Championship, we get Lex Luger defending against Stan the Lariat Hansen. This was probably my least favorite match on the card, and it's no knock on Luger or Hansen. A lot of the other matches were good. This one was good too. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad match. It just felt, with everything else that was going on, moved at a much faster pace than this did. This was a little bit slower, a little bit more in the style of the 80s, which isn't a bad thing, but it's kind of jarring when you're watching the rest of the card moves at a faster pace. And I'm not talking about like comparing it to now. In the time frame, this was slower. It was a little bit on the clunky side. Luger didn't quite get to where he would be. I thought Luger was never a great in-ring wrestler. He did get to where he was a good to very good in-ring wrestler, but at this time I still feel like he needed someone on the other side that wanted to make him look like a great wrestler. I don't know that Hansen was that guy, and I don't know that this might have been Hansen trying to protect his spot, because in Japan, he's considered one of the top guys. He comes here, he has to protect it a bit, so maybe he was just not wanting to give Luger a lot. Ultimately, Dan Spivey comes out, distracts Lex Luger. Hansen hits a lariat, gets a win, he becomes a new U.S. champion. And what had to be a surprise, at least at that time, I'm giving this match a 3. Like I said, it's probably my least favorite match on the card. A little bit on the clunky side, but not a bad match. After that, we get an interview with Teddy Long talking about Doom. Just a good interview. We love Teddy Long, so talking about a tag team which would foreshadow his whole rest of his career. He was a tag team match guy. I love Teddy. That was a great interview. Then we go into the main event of the evening, which is Sting defending the NWA World Championship. They were still using the NWA title at this time, going up against Sid Vicious. I liked this. At the time, this felt inevitable. It felt like Sid was going to be a huge star, which he did end up being. And it felt like he really was coming into his own, especially as part of the Horsemen. They really helped him to become what he was. This felt like a collision that was destined to happen. The shame of it is it happens right in the middle of the Black Scorpion build. So it kind of felt like this was going to be a foregone conclusion, because we know Sting has to go up against the Black Scorpion, most likely going to happen at Starrcade. We didn't know that at the time, now we do. But it's kind of made this match have a little less importance. Even then, you kind of felt like, okay, Sting's not going to lose this. To me, it took a little bit of a hit on Sid's career as well, and I believe this is one of the reasons why he would leave for WWF. I believe the next year or very shortly after this. The thing that most people remember on the match is they wrestle to the back, they come back out, Sting looks a little bit taller and doesn't have a ponytail all of a sudden, and Sid gets the win when Sting tries to pick him up and he falls on top of him. Then we see the real Sting come out from the back, who has a rope tied around him, so it looks like the Horseman tried to pull a fast one. Eventually we do realize that Barry Windham was the guy playing Sting, or the fake Sting. The match gets restarted. Sting goes through his comeback. All in all, pretty good. He does pick up the win here. All in all, I'm going to give it a 3. A little bit of the wonkiness there, and again, because of the feeling of it and how I feel like it may have derailed Sid Vicious a bit, I have to give it a little bit less of a rating. Overall, I thought this was an enjoyable show for the 6 matches they gave us. I thought it was fun. I really would have liked to see the entire card. I would have liked to see what else was on there. Maybe it would have been worse. Maybe they cut out some really bad things. I don't honestly remember the pay-per-view. I can't say that I've watched this in its entirety since back in 1990, so I don't 100% remember. I remember some of the matches, definitely. Sting vs. Sid sticks out in my mind. Doom versus the Horsemen, of course. And the Steiners and the Nasty Boys. But I would have liked to see the complete product, to see what else was on the card. Maybe it would have made the rating better. Maybe it would have made it worse. Who knows? Overall, I'm going to give the show a 4. Even though there were some matches that were just on the good side, I thought the very good were overwhelming. There were more of those than to me, especially when you include the segments with it. A nice little time capsule of where WCW was in 1990. A lot of good wrestling, starting to change in and bringing some of the hokiness that WWE started, basically. Again, I thought it was a good show, rather enjoyable. I definitely recommend you checking it out. With all that being said, smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you made it all the way to the end, let's put Barry Windham in the comments. Barry doesn't get a lot of respect from everyone, even though I'll hear a lot of people talk about him being one of the great wrestlers of all time. He just doesn't get brought up as much as he should. So let's put Barry Windham in the comments. With that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.